Sweet. Thank you. Should we wait a couple more minutes? Sweet. Let's start to kick it off. My name is Jack Zimmer. I'm a senior cybersecurity member, a cybersecurity major, and a boilers officer. I've been around here for about 3.5 years now, and I'm going to go over pen testing and a real-life application of CTF skills. So this is the why we're getting into this, why you're getting into CTF, besides passion and enjoyment for doing this, but seeing future career paths and kind of understanding the messy genre cybersecurity is. There's no general cybersecurity position coming out of college, right? It's a huge field, and there's a lot of different opportunities there. So we're going to kind of break that down and look at how your CTF skills can fit perfectly into these categories and better help people understand what those categories are, and doing some pen testing demos. Starting out, let's break down red teaming and pen testing. So this is often discussed. People can oftentimes use red teamer and pen tester kind of interchangeably, but there is a real distinct separation between what a red team is and what a pen tester is. And there's also more than one category of pen tester, but let's separate red team and pen tester. So first, for red team, they tend to be for large engagements. So this is basically top to finish levels of engagement with a company directly. The whole engagement is unknown to any IT specialists, analysts working there. It is there for them to discover the adversary. And all the red teamers are professionals. They've been in industry 10 plus years. You need a lot of experience in the space to get to that level. And they are the ones that are going to be secretive. Their end goal is full domain admin, right? They are going to be stealthy, highly skilled, use a broad range of skills. It's not going to be focused on a specific server. It's going to be kind of across the system scope. Again, scope is defined by the security professionals or by the CISO, let's say in this scenario, will directly engage with a company that has red teams. And then they can be deployed to target the network. And now this is how it differs from pen tester. So for pen tests, it's smaller engagements, right? The engagements are known by the IT professionals, and it's a set defined scope. So let's say a company needs to understand if there's security vulnerabilities within some specific sector of their organization. Now they could have their own team do that, whether that's DevOps, but they kind of want you to enumerate the security space of their systems, give them vulnerability assessments, run the latest exploits and vulnerability testing against their network, right, and really test this out. So they're oftentimes given an internal system access at the beginning, right? So you'll kind of set these guys up within a system. You'll give them some minor IT controls, and they'll move in and they'll test your web applications and your management web software. So you kind of want to put them in different areas and layers in your specific defense. So you don't start from the very beginning and have them fish their way in and that kind of stuff like a red team would. They're looking for known vulnerabilities in a network. Sometimes they'll find a brand new CVE, but that's not really the job of a pen tester when they're directly hired to work for a company. They're kind of looking for existing vulnerabilities, ways that an attacker could pivot, that kind of thing. And it's also great for networking. If you work as a pen tester, you can pen test companies' infrastructure, whether that's basic communication where they have management software working with a ton of PCs, or web software within their internal network that allows, let's say, teams to communicate and that kind of stuff. So vulnerabilities can be found and tested there. You can find cross-site scripting, ways to enumerate other parts of the network that the attacker wasn't supposed to get access to, and so on. And they can give big presentations in front of the security teams. And these security teams are usually multiple managers, CISO, some security higher-ups, along with like the boots on the ground security analysts that already work at that company. This is a great way to network, right? Because you're going from massive company to massive company, presenting the vulnerabilities that you found as a pen tester. And it's great because then you can pivot and find those jobs. You're already comfortable and have knowledge of their network. And sometimes as a security professional, you can kind of get put in a specific SOC or a specific portion of that network and industry, and it's hard to communicate across 20 different companies. With being a pen tester, it'll give you that visibility in a ton of different areas. This is if you work specifically for a pen testing company, and you would be a consultant that would be working. Individual application pen testing. So this is a little different. You can search, find CVEs for money, RCEs, XSSs, testing web apps. These are all your bug bounty guys, right? So you can use BugCrowd. There's a ton of other sites. Google has their own site, and a lot of companies are advertising their main page, and they'll reward you for finding vulnerabilities within their software. So this is kind of a lot of the grunt work, but there's still a lot of money to be made in this area, and it's pretty much just open source security at its raw level. This is really beneficial for the community. For the companies, it's pretty much just cheap security labor. They only have to pay people that find vulnerabilities and bugs. That's why you want to get good. And a lot of the work is for mobile apps. Let's say you're testing a Facebook mobile application, right? Let's say you're looking for vulnerabilities for the Android system. You want to find a way to manipulate login or get access to some sort of user database, that kind of stuff. You can start to break down the web protocols and understand how the mobile application communicates with Facebook servers in this case, right? And because of that, you can bring it on further to be able to understand their protocol and then understand kind of how that breaks down, how you can break it. And then you make a big report going through your method. And if it's big enough, you can get news attention, Twitter, obviously, and you can kind of move from there. A lot of people love doing this because it's independent work. You can just work for yourself and do this. So if you're in between positions, or if you're still in college and you want some extra cash, you can mess around on BugCrowd, find some bugs. A lot of times you can find a lot of low-level like cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. And if you can find them, improve them within specific web apps, you can make some decent change off of those per exploit. Now let's break down the red team kill chain. So red team breaks down from top to bottom, like I was saying before. They start with recon, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, command and control, lateral movement, local privilege escalation, domain escalation, and then exfiltration. So with recon, you want to find out every single piece of network information and maybe social information that you can get around the adversary. So since red teams are hired, let's use the Facebook example.com. They say, okay, I'll hire a team of 4. We'll top to bottom find a way into my system, escalate your privileges, start collecting zombies within the network. Those are computers that you can control, right? And then you can kind of move forward until you've access to the whole system. So let's start with recon. A lot of popular tools, a lot of industry tools. You have Nmap. It's been around for a really long time. Nmap will do some vulnerability testing, but it's great for being able to enumerate hosts on a network. Nessus is a great tool for vulnerability assessment. So you can basically run an open source tool on specific IPs looking for specific vulnerabilities, and you can start to visualize what this is going to look like. DNS Recon is another great tool. It will basically give you a brief of the DNS security around your target. AWS Bucket Dump, that's another great tool. These are mostly all GitHub open source tools that anyone can find, utilize, and learn within any sort of Linux application. So if you want to be good at certain areas for red team and red teaming, this is also great because all these skills and tools are open source. If you want to break them down, understand how those work, you're completely free to do so. Right. So other recon tools, you got Git Harvester. This is very interesting. So a lot of issues are companies will end up pushing their code to GitHub because they want open source, right? They want to do this, but they'll include things like an API key or specific bot IDs or that kind of things for their APIs that they don't plan to include. So Git Harvester is a great tool to be able to say, yeah, this is my target organization. These are the keywords I want to search for, and it'll predestine and pre-give you some set keywords it'll search for, and then it'll just act as a bot. Use GitHub's API, and it will just drop you a list of leaked information for a specific company. Now, companies are catching on to this. A lot of times you'll see specific honeypots within GitHub pushes. So it'll be fake API keys, fake software put in by companies. So it'll throw off the adversary. Because if I can give and set a specific API key as who I know is the attacker and then leak that purposely, if the attacker is trying to use that API key, I know who they are. I can start a threat profile on that specific adversary. And then we have Maltego, Shodan, Census. Maltego's good. You basically give it a domain, and it'll pull a ton of information, right? And it'll map that out for you, and it'll say, okay, this is the domain scope of this domain. It's here. It's ASN numbers. And then from there, you can move into Shodan and Census, which are two other great tools that have basically their objectives are to scan the internet, find existing vulnerabilities, and kind of keep that up all on a nice, pretty web page. I can actually pull this up real quick. So we get census. That's what this looks like, right? And we're going to want to search the IP space for census. So for instance, there are 53 million available web servers, right? 443 available HTTPS servers, so on. And this breaks down. Some of you may have explored this space before and done the same thing for Shodan. You can actually break down between webcams, people using default passwords, a lot of easily exposed information that they trust the internet to kind of hide in obscurity. This will clean that up right away, right? So these are, see right now, 2,497 exposed webcams that can be viewed, right? People have accidentally configured things poorly, port forwarding, and unprotected web server that has access to webcam, right? So no one wants that. That's not fun. That's kind of dangerous. So the solution is basically to be aware of your scope as a company and what is available online. That's what makes a red team engagement really powerful, because they will go through and they will find every single way that you could misconfigure something and leave, let's say, AWS boxes public and misconfigured. Another great tool, AWS dump, will do that for you, right? Let's say you find a target, you want to slowly gather that information, and you want to create a exploit, or create some sort of malware package that you want to feed to your client targets. Let's say you want to target James in IT at Facebook, right? So you can use things like ExploitDB to find, let's say, a simple Microsoft Word exploit. Lucky Strike will help you find macros within and create macros to execute things within Microsoft Word when the target opens the package, right? And then you have a lot of delivery methods. So you got Kingfisher, Cred Sniper, Ponoth, even Cobalt Strike will do this too. And this is basically a really common delivery method, and that's just mail. Mail servers are a huge attack surface at every single organization. There's something that has to exist, and it's really hard to have a functioning system, right, and a functioning organization if you just disable email. And a lot of the mail filters are not the greatest, right? So you run into some issues there. You can't just disable everything. You don't want to lose sales. You want to kind of have the client in mind. So because of that, you need to be able to worry about your mail and being able to secure that. So a lot of phishing schemes are done through these tools. And once you move into that, you get into exploitation. So let's say you have a Word doc that executes a very simple macro on a client host, on your target host, right? Let's say it's a Windows computer in the IT system, and they're sitting on there, and they open up the Word doc, and in the background, they have macros enabled, and they run a PowerShell script to go and start talking back to your server, right? So you can understand that, and you can start the exploitation process. That's when you want to have like Metasploit, Cobalt Strike usually involved, and then you basically find your first target, your first way into their network and into their system. Metasploit is very common. It's an open source framework that has been used for, I think it's like 8 or 9 years now, where they have worked on this software. It's incredibly simplistic. in an almost scary way, where you literally go through, find the vulnerability you want to use, enable it, and then give it a target, give it a host, and then run the exploit. And then it'll set up a simple shell between you and the target, and you can start issuing commands like screenshot, and you can start doing network enumeration from that host, right? So that can be a struggle within networks because it'll all look like it's coming from this one IT guy's computer. So moving on, Cobalt Strike is, I mentioned that a couple times before. It is like Metasploit, but it is a GUI, and it is an incredibly powerful and dangerous tool, right? You have almost every single attacker, from a red teamer to an illegal hacker, let's say, someone that is not hired, someone you need to protect your system against, right, can get access to cracked versions of the software. And it's a very powerful tool. It'll do phishing, it'll do exploitation, it'll do lateral movement, it'll do exfiltration, and it'll carry a lot of the delivery method, even using mail servers and that kind of stuff from within the network. And you're also able to export a lot of beautiful made reports based on every single target you exploited, the specific vulnerability. It is a powerful tool. And that's why it's about, I think it's like $2,000 a month. Right, and then from there you want to be able to command and control your target environment, right? So that's where you basically have a web server that will allow you to talk to the infected machine, so you can communicate back and forth. Metasploit will allow you to do that. Merlin's a popular web application that'll do that. Even a lot of companies today that provide red team hardware will sell their own C2s. For example, you have Hack5 has their own C2, and you can link their software with it. Most of these things are cloud-based, and how they're made is kept very secret and rotated, because it's kind of the creme de la crop of attacker control. If you have a powerful C2 that can communicate with hosts pretty undetected and shift easily and not allow adversaries and police to monitor that activity, you can be really dangerous in the field. So that's why hunting down C2s is really important to do. Again, lateral movement, mail sniper is a common tool. Basically, once you have a PC, Windows PC under your control, you can easily rip through a ton of mail to find passwords and other usable information that you can use to try to move across the network. BetterCap is a great tool. Once you have a PC infected, you can start looking at the network, setting up ARP spoofing, right, man-in-the-middle tools, and collect password information, look at what the traffic looks like, start to understand the internal network of the system. CrackMap, PowerUp SQL. PowerUp SQL will basically just hit a SQL database and try just a bunch of exploits to be able to take control. Once you're at a local client level, right? Let's say you move from the basic IT guy to the IT guy's manager, who has more permissions, right? Through lateral movement, you want to come from a user to, let's say, an administrator in that host. So you can use things like Mimikatz, which you can call from PowerShell, Tokenator, PowerUp, Sherlock, right? These are all tools that are all open source that you can use to collect password information, exploit Windows kernel vulnerabilities, and try to escalate your privilege within that system. Okay, now we have domain escalation. This is the big boy. Okay, this is the target of all of this work. If you can get domain admin on a system, you own the system. You own the network. This is what you show to the CISO and say, we own you. We can do whatever we want. We have domain admin. We can control your entire infrastructure, right? This is the biggest thing that companies want to avoid, besides having their vulnerable AWS buckets leaking millions and millions and millions of user data online. Yeah, so for domain escalation, you have AD Recon, which is different from this Recon because you're within the network, right? So it's kind of just a quick vulnerability scan to find out if this domain controller is easily exploitable. You can kind of move through and get that info, right? Grouper does the same thing. It's web app. Ping Castle does the same thing. Once you have the domain escalation, it gets to the exfiltration part. Cloakify is a great tool. You want to be able to evade network detection. It is very difficult to move a lot of big data outside of a network without that getting picked up, because they will have things within infrastructure that looks and monitors for large movements of traffic like that. So Cloakify, as well as PowerShell RAT. PowerShell RAT is interesting. They try to disguise the traffic moving out as regular mail Google traffic. So it is a Python-based backdoor using Gmail attachments. They will try to slowly exfiltrate the traffic using anonymous Google accounts and send those attachments over the wire. If you're looking at it from, let's say, you're looking at the overall infrastructure and network, you can see terabytes of traffic in a day, right? It's really hard to see slow data moving out unless you incorporate some sort of deep learning and understanding of those clients. Oh, my bad. Okay, now let's break down the blue team. This will be your incident response team, digital forensics, threat hunting, cyber intelligence, security operations center. So you got your SOC analysts, DevOps, virus technicians, security architecture, and security administrator. Incident response, what they do is they'll get a ticket. They say, okay, we think malware executed on this machine. That would be a high severity incident. You need to shut down that machine. You need to understand how to respond. What are the specific protocols for that machine? And then while someone is focusing on the issue head on, right, you also have another team member that you're working with that pulls that malware down, right, and they're analyzing it. There are tools like Malware Sandbox. Malware Sandbox is, let's say, Cuckoo, right? It's an open source malware sandbox. It will allow you to execute malware in a separated environment where you can understand who it's talking to, what it's doing, get a list of the PowerShell commands it tried to run, right? Is it using macros? What is it doing? How can we figure out what that software is doing, what that malware is doing? And then can we see if, let's say it talked to a C2 that's ice cream candy 47.ru, right? It's probably most likely a Russian attacker. We take that and we can then search using tools like Splunk and see if any of the other clients within the infrastructure have reached out to that C2 and have tried to connect to that client. Because if we know that, then we can start to scope how many targets are being attacked within the network, right? We can get a base understanding of how many of our employees' devices have been compromised. And then if it's a large issue, then you can go through and you can find out what data has been exfiltrated and that kind of stuff. That's when you move into digital forensics, where you're analyzing every single one of the VMs. And keep in mind, these red team engagements can last months and months and months. This isn't a quick thing. This is very quiet and calculated over time, right? That's where you have your threat hunting come in. The threat hunt team are teams of people that will look for these adversaries, right? They hunt with the assumption that these targets are within your system and you need to weed them out. A lot of common methods you can find exploits on Twitter, right? What are people using? What are red teams using right now? What are the best methods and the most popular methods right now for, let's say, network enumeration or data exfiltration and that kind of stuff. And they'll set up specific traps for software like Splunk to look for. So you can set up triggers within Splunk, which is a big data management tool, right? So they'll take your terabytes of traffic a day and they'll let you send queries to it and say, okay, let's take Jack's computer, right, which is me. Let's see who he requested with today. Let's assume that Jack's system's been compromised. Let's look at everything he's talked to within the last hour, every single protocol, and then you can start to see, oh, he's sending weird ARP traffic to all of these other hosts, right? And then you can understand, okay, yeah, there are ARP spoofing there. We can assume that the traffic between the other hosts and that subnet has been compromised. You can kind of move through there, right? So that's why threat hunting is so important. You need those alerts. You need to start understanding the systems on your network. You need to plant honeypots and things like that, so you start to understand your company's individual infrastructure and ways to prevent and trigger those things. And once you can find and hunt down those targets, then you can set up controls and find out, okay, how did they evade me this far? What can we do to prevent that? How can we change the configurations and the rules within the system to prevent that? Is it software that we don't need or software that we need that we don't have yet? Can we afford this? Is there an open source solution? That kind of thing. Then we break into cyber intelligence, right? These are the people that will look at all of the current adversaries that are out there, whether that is Russian attackers, Chinese attackers, right? They will profile all of them down to the individual advanced persistent threats, right? You need to be able to understand your adversary, and it's very important. This can be a extra cost. Not every organization will have advanced threat intelligence within a system, or threat and cyber intelligence within a system, right? A lot of times, all of these are handled over to the basic security operations center analysts, right? Because it's a big gig. We got to remember that security is oftentimes seen as a cost. So not every organization is going to have a large separation of skills that's needed, right? So a lot of these things, like let's say incident response, digital forensics, they may be the same thing. Threat hunting, cyber intelligence, they may fall under the same categories in certain organizations. Moving into more CS-focused skills where you have DevOps, right? These are the people that are working with the infrastructure team to put in place the solutions that that the business wants, right? So you got to always remember that you're rotating and revolving around the all of your other employees, right? So everything you do needs to be cognizant of them. And if you're in the security environment and you're working with, let's say, a business team and they want to implement this web app that will allow them to predict when they're going to, let's say, just find the most valuable sale, right? So it'll collect information, it'll do this, they can remote into it, right? You'll have DevOps and people that will walk through that software, see if it's vulnerable, put it in test cases, test it in a sandbox, move out, and it's kind of the long process of making sure, is this secure or are we just integrating this into our network with vulnerabilities, right? And if it's, let's say, legacy software, if it's a vulnerability you can't control, how are we going to properly sandbox this? How are we going to separate this from the rest of the network? What controls are we going to put in place so this server can operate without being affected by the rest of the network? How can we securely hide this, right? So DevOps come in with, let's say, company acquisitions, right? So let's say Facebook bought TikTok. TikTok has a ton of insecure infrastructure. How are we going to integrate TikTok's unsecure infrastructure into Facebook's infrastructure, right? We need to plan out how that's done, what can get secured, what's not secure. They're the boots on the ground for that. Then we go into virus technicians. They are the ones that will break down that malware. Let's say if the incident response team is not capable or scoped for that, right? You'll have someone specific for breaking down what is this piece of malware to do, and that can be done within a malware sandbox, or that can be done within static analysis, right? So that's where your basic reverse engineering skills come in that you've learned. Let's say there's a piece of malware, say it's a binary that runs within a Linux system. You want to be able to break that down. The virus technicians are people that will understand that malware inside and out, understands how it operates, and understand how to break it. And if it's ransomware, right, you're going to want to be able to understand how that piece of software has encrypted your hosts, and is there a way to break it, right? Was this encryption done poorly? This is where your crypto people come in, right? Where you need to understand how to fix this. You'll see broken crypto everywhere because everything that's done specifically maliciously, right? You can't go through the regular channels where it's signed code and that kind of stuff. So if someone's trying to do that, chances are there's ways to be able to break that specific encryption. Security architecture, similar to DevOps, it's basically creating secure infrastructure within a system. Security administrator, similar to sysadmin, but they focus around security. Now these are the blue team methods, right? So this is the blue team kill chain, where it starts with prevention, protection, mitigation, response, recovery. This is kind of the process tree of how this will work in a corporate environment. For threat intelligence, they'll use things like domain tools, industry intel sharing, where they're specifically working with other people in industry. Let's say Facebook talks with Twitter, and they say, hey, we've been seeing these 16-year-old kids that have been trying to use our in-house tools to log in and reset passwords on specific clients. And Facebook says, okay, we haven't seen that, but thank you for the heads up. And then Twitter says, please help. 17-year-olds have started a crypto scam with every single blue check user within our social network, right? That's a scary thing, and it completely overcuts the security measures that they had in place, right? So it's how can you share that information with Facebook and other hosts, so we know, okay, maybe they'll share information with me when there's something that I need to look out for. You have Maltego, which is a tool we've talked about before, where you'll basically give it a specific host, view the information around those hosts, right? What's your biggest openings there? Where are you visible? And it'll also allow you to enumerate advanced persistent threats, APTs. So let's say a Chinese hacker group is known to write code in a specific way. They're known to have control over these specific command and control servers. Let's try to find out about them specifically. And you can start to enumerate and build on to those hosts and queries using open source intelligence gathering to understand who those hosts are. UDA, they're basically they'll give you intelligence updates regarding security, government alerts. US government will send out security alerts regards around patching and that kind of stuff, or advanced persistent threats. Twitter has honestly risen as one of the greatest open source intelligence tools for understanding and learning about adversaries and being prepared for that, right? You guys have seen that. I don't know if you guys follow Hacker News or certain people that will talk about, let's say, new Cobalt Strike loaders and break down the latest ransomware, the latest malware, right? Follow and track, let's say, Mirai or different botnets that are targeting your system. There's a lot of intelligence sharing there. So it's really useful, and it's important to integrate into your system. And if you are in a position where you're in threat intelligence or you're in incident response, you're working in a SOC, if you can integrate, or you're doing threat hunting, if you can integrate that information into your job, your career, you're going to be seen as very strong and powerful and capable, because you know what's going on, and you can then apply that information to your industry and to your company specifically to save them millions, right? You're going to be seen as very valuable if you can do that. Prevention or protection, right? These are going to be your basic system administration tools that are set up mostly autonomous to prevent attacks, right? So you get Palo Alto, they're a very popular software firewall, and they have a lot of other applications and usages. But they will break down everything from not just port or protocol, but they'll also break down type, right? Let's say a company wants to limit communications to hacker websites, right? So let's say hacker forums or boilers.com, boilers.net. Those are seen as hacker sites, right? You don't want your clients to go there. You can prevent those specific sites. You can also prevent targets. You can start to understand the network traffic inside the network. And then the FortiGate, Cisco, they all do very similar things. Palo Alto is kind of the leader in that space right now. You get automated detection and prevention. So Sophos, Cylance, Microsoft, Infoblox, Splunk, right? Those tools work within the network to try to implement automated detection, specific rules set up to try and prevent suspicious traffic, right? It'll alert you, it'll create a system alert with whatever team management software you're using. It'll alert the the incident response team, right? It creates a ticket. That's kind of how that operates. Splunk is a powerful tool. Like I said before, right? It'll allow you to query and look for those things and create rules for automatic detection. Threat hunting, Splunk again, because you'll be able to see the targets in the system. And then coming down to incident response, a lot of common tools. You'll get Cuckoo, which is I'll pull it up. It is a very popular open source malware sandbox. And Cuckoo will allow you to either use their API to submit malware directly to this web server, right? It'll store all of the malware in a set location. It won't let it be executable clearly. If a company is integrating Cuckoo into their system, you kind of want to make it separated, make some sort of enclave that's separate from the network, that you can send, let's say, suspicious email attachments to automatically, have Cuckoo execute it within a Windows VM, and then from there, you can get information from these VMs and talk and view reports from the Cuckoo host, right? So, sandbox report. Let's see if I find a report for you guys. So this is kind of what some of the information will look like. So they'll give you a basic summary where you'll get a size of the malware sample, If it's an executable, it'll score it out of 10 with how dangerous is this sample. And then it'll break down. You can do some basic static analysis on it. It'll do network analysis. You set up your Windows host, your Linux hosts with specific certs and things like man-in-the-middle dump, so you'll be able to decrypt any traffic going out. So let's say if there's a specific command sent to a command and control server over HTTPS, you can decrypt that. You can understand what the server is that it's talking to, and you can start to understand kind of what's being communicated. Also, if it's trying to exfiltrate data, you can see the methods that it uses, and it'll break that down into protocols. You can compare specific malware samples. A lot of tools do that similarly. And you can use VirusTotal and things like that, which will kind of break down those malware samples by hash, share information to understand who's talking to who, who's trying to target where. And then once real scenario machines get exploited, if all of your other checks fail, right, that's when you want to break out encase, volatility, understand where that malware is being kept on those machines, and then using that information to find out the scope of the impact. And then again, IDA is a great tool. It'll allow you to reverse engineer some malware, and then you can start to manually kind of deobfuscate what this piece of malicious software is doing within your system. For a real case scenario for that, we had WannaCry ransomware, right? That was a huge issue. We had a independent researcher, security analyst, that broke down a WannaCry sample. He ended up finding a domain in there, found out the domain wasn't registered the domain, and found that there was actually a kill switch for WannaCry. All of those software would try to connect and talk to that specific server, and if it couldn't talk to it, it would keep going, keep spreading. But once the attacker registered the domain, then the attack stopped, right? So understanding how the malware samples work can be really powerful, can help prevent a lot of major attacks. Because you gotta understand, most of these attackers, especially for wide-scale attacks, they can't individually control every single individual piece of malware, right? They have a C2, but most of everything is autonomous. And it's operating, and you may just want to get the target to download your ransomware and then send you some crypto, and then you'll decrypt their machine, right? So being able to understand those things, how it operates, and breaking that chain can be really helpful. Applicable skills, right? Why are you doing CTFs? First off, OS skills is one of the most important things that you can use to apply to career in CS, right? If you're doing software, even if it's not even security related, right? Getting better at OS is dramatically important, right? System administration, networking, every single thing that you're going to do that involves a computer, you need to be good at OS. Critical and creative thinking, right? You are every single day, not every single day, but every weekend, right? On the CTFs that you can play, you're taking the time to harden those critical and creative thinking skills. And companies want to see that, right? They want to see that you can be given a problem, even if you have no understanding of a specific architecture of, let's say, a binary, that you can start to learn, start to know what this is, and then create a solution around something that was previously unknown to you. Even if you don't have the wide scope of knowledge of, let's say, everything computer-based, right? Being able to understand how to quickly learn these things and apply a solution is incredibly important. Time-sensitive team experience. Let's say you're in incident response. You know you're being targeted. There's an adversary within your network. They're exfiltrating data. That's a stressful situation. Being able to handle that quickly find a critical and creative thinking solution to handle that, right? That's going to be incredibly useful to you and to your employer and to your employer's customers whose data are at risk, right? And when you're CTFing, you're playing with the team, you're working, and you're rushing to get there first. Let's say we're doing attack and defense CTFs, right? We see that our certain interface is being exploited. We don't want to take that down because that's millions of dollars, right? That's kind of the risk that you need to weigh, where is it worth taking the service down, or can we apply a quick patch to this service without breaking something, right? And without the attacker to be able to access this machine. And it's all in a time crunch, so you need to be able to get better under pressure. And CTFs are great practice because it's not real, but you want to win, right? So when you're with your team and you're playing, it's just going to get better and better. Malware analysis. Reverse engineering is incredibly important and useful in so many different areas. Being able to break down and understand how something works, how a piece of software operates, and being able to de-obfuscate that software is a useful skill in so many industries, and you can apply it into a lot of places. Understanding how things work is kind of the crux to all computer-related jobs and careers, right? Being able to understand that and apply that is the most important thing. But specifically for malware analysis and the security applied skill, you're going to want to be able to reverse engineer that malware, and you're going to want to deobfuscate all of those PowerShell calls that are going to look like mush in some log file somewhere that they tried to hide, right? And if you can rip that out of this binary that gets executed and understand and decrypt what that PowerShell command is trying to say, you can understand how it communicates with your C2s, and then you can understand how you move from there. Scripting, right? This is incredibly useful. IT, CS, being able to throw something together quickly that works to make your life and your time faster. You want to be efficient, right? And people that are going to be good and efficient and harden their skills on the fly are going to want to get very good at scripting. That's done mainly in Python. I think I'm the only one on Boilers that just really likes Bash just a lot, even though it's not as fast. They each have their uses, right? Python's really important for interacting with servers and being able to do that. Then you're moving into web security, right? That's an important skill everywhere. HTTP, HTTPS are the protocols for life on the internet right now. That's how we talk, that's how we share things, that's how our mobile apps communicate. That's how every single web server, bank interface, everything operates on some area, on some front end. That's a web server. So being able to understand, break down how those web servers work, secure them, configure them properly, that's a skill that you can apply to everywhere, especially if you're creating web servers, right? You know how they fail, you know how you can secure this to a database. If you can understand how they break, you can understand how you can work them successfully. You're creating a system, and oftentimes it can be lazily done, right? You want to be able to take the time to handle that securely. Reporting. You need some good written skills in a lot of scenarios, right? Maybe not directly CS if it's just code comments, which are sometimes not even written, right? For job security, obviously. But having strong written skills in the like security application space is very important. You need to be able to demonstrate in, let's say, a ticket, how you found this target, or let's say in this analyze malware, what specific sections of memory got executed where, and so on, right? You need to be able to communicate that. CTF challenge write-ups are very good, and if you're writing a CVE, right, there's some similar application there where you're reporting on your findings, versus what you're finding in a challenge in a service that's written. It's directly applicable. Again, command line experience, right? Efficient command line skills equals money. You will be seen better, right, by industry, by whatever company you're working for, if you can be efficient. You will be able to make more money, and CTF time is a fun way to be able to work on those skills without having to feel like it's a chore. Spending your entire life in a command line is kind of difficult at first, but will make everything a lot easier and a lot efficient. And it's a really useful skill that you could slowly build over time, playing CTFs and doing that kind of stuff. TAC Detection. This is almost unique to attack and defense CTFs, even as well as building CTF infrastructure, being able to know when an adversary is sending normal traffic, right, or a normal person sending normal traffic versus an adversary sending malicious traffic. You need to understand and be able to differentiate what that looks like. For our cases, it's mainly just looking at Wireshark and breaking out raw stuff, but in the field, right, in industry, they have advanced tools that can monitor and create a scope for what good traffic looks like, and if anything expands outside that scope, it's an immediate flag. And that's how like a ticket could be created. Hey, XYZ incident response person, you need to look into this specific ticket, right? That's how that all connects. And then threat hunt team would have obviously set that trap for looking at that scope of traffic that has changed. Threat enumeration, right, where you're needing to understand who the adversary is. This is important for intelligence. This is why you set up honeypots within your system, and you don't want to just ban every single adversary. You need to learn what they want, what they're after, who they are, what their skill level is, and oftentimes within government infrastructure or higher level security infrastructure that has kind of a lot of money thrown at it, you will have a ton of these honeypots, and they will do a lot of target monitoring and threat enumeration and finding out who those people are. And then again, threat hunting, you're setting up those traps. If you're creating this infrastructure or working on let's say a Python web server that's sitting and operating within an attack and defense CTF, and let's say all boilers is working on this. Some people are monitoring traffic, right? Some people are writing exploits to target the opponent's team's infrastructure. Important tool for threat hunting is being able to create those webs, right? Think of yourself as a spider if you're a threat hunter. You want to set up those traps explicitly and then wait for your target to spring them. Forensics, right? This is a skill that's often joked about in CTF because it's not as fun as reverse engineering and that kind of stuff. But forensic skills can go along the lines of CTF skills. Basically, being able to find specific information very fast in a haystack is useful, right? It's useful for incident response. It's useful for threat hunting. It's useful for DevOps, finding out what's not working, why it's not working, being able to find that vulnerability out, and being able to analyze things. That is an important skill. Even for finding bugs in a code, right? You write for 3 days straight, you have a rough night, you write for another day, and then you spend the next 7 days debugging what you wrote on the last day. Being able to find out why something is happening quickly with a lot of data is a useful skill. And that gets directly applied in forensics. The final point is infinity, because you can see that the more time you spend and pull knowledge and learn about different CTF targets, reverse engineering different applications, whether that's web, whether that's Linux binary, Windows binary, learning how things operate on a ton of different architectures. You begin to learn how this system works, and you learn a ton of different use cases that you can then apply to everything. So CTF skills are incredibly useful, and this is not something that's generally directly taught in classes, right? You guys have heard us say this a ton of times, but this is kind of skills that you can and need to build individually when you're in industry. But if you start during CTFs, right, you can start to build these skills early on, and then you can be on the forefront when you move in. You get out of college, right, or you get out of grad school, you move in. You can kind of get on a level that that a recruiter would be looking for right away, and it'll absolutely give you an edge. Questions? Sorry, I jumped this on you guys. I gave you a ton of information, and yeah, I kind of want to hear if anyone has any specific questions or anything like that. Even for people that are watching this at a later date, you can hop on our Discord and you can talk to me directly, or you can talk to our team directly. That should be about it. It's 7:30. I kind of ran over my time for a demo, but we'll be able to see and apply those skills later on. I had a great time talking to all of you guys.